Thomas, it's amazing to have you in our studio. What brings you to Seoul, South Korea?
Oh man, it's a bit of a strange answer. A few years ago, I saw like a news article about this prison in Korea that people check themselves into to like relax from stress, because it's kind of a way to detach from the outside world, kind of have an inner reflection by just being completely stripped from any kind of stimuli, any kind of connection to the outside world. And I was so curious about this place, and they've been closed for 3 years now because of COVID.
Yeah.
The company's called Happy Tori, so they do all sorts of like theater therapy, they called it. So it's kind of like to come and play with other people, and then they do like week-long, and then they have this 24-hour thing where you get locked in. I didn't realize it was basically solitary confinement in this tiny little box of a room, just enough to put like a yoga mat on the floor to like sleep on.
Was there any windows or?
It was one window, yeah, which was nice, and you can only open it like this much. So I would just open it and breathe air, like, oh man. I literally just got out a couple hours ago of like 48 hours of just sitting in a room with nothing.
That's why you have this like a Zen vibe about
Yeah,
you right now.
yeah, exactly.
At peace.
Yeah.
Appreciation towards the world.
Exactly.
It's
I'm
like,
just
thank
excited
you.
to see other faces. I'm like, new friends.
Wow.
No, I mean, the exercise was really beautiful in reflection, and they give you prompts to think about your life and where you're going and where you've been and who you're most grateful for and these kind of things. So at first I thought it was strange of a concept to get locked, because they literally lock you in the room. At first I thought
So they're not messing around?
No, like they
What
lock
if you
it.
just like, hey, I need to go to the bathroom or something?
So you have a toilet, that's the only thing you have, and a sink.
Wow.
And then the food gets patched through a little hatch.
It's like a jail cell.
Yeah,
pretty
it
much.
is basically like a jail cell. And you get a little notebook and a pen, and that's it. Like you can't bring a book, you can't bring a phone, obviously, that's the point, and no computer, nothing that from the outside, just this notebook and yourself.
Oh man, I gotta give it a shot.
It was actually surprisingly great. The first 24 hours was more, I just almost just slept and took it super easy. And then the next day I really went deep in reflection. Yeah, when you sit there for hours at a time, eventually you just, you know, you have no other choice but to revisit the past and think, let go of certain things. And yeah, it came at an interesting time, because I've been going nonstop for the past 2 months, traveling to like 8 different countries in 2 months. So it's been a lot, and this was the perfect time to just unplug, sit down, reflect. And so this space that they created was perfect for it.
How did you even find a topic like that? Because we've been living in Korea for some time. We've never heard of it. Right?
Yeah. I think maybe it was, I don't know if it was Amar or Matt, one of the original, 2 of the other guys from Yes Theory. They found it on Reddit, I think. I'm not sure. Just some people also text us strange ideas. You know, they're like, have you heard of this place?
Well, you guys are known
You should
for
go
that,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, so my friends, anytime they land on something that sounds like something we do, they just send it along. Like I get the craziest texts sometimes, but it's great. Sometimes it does lead to ideas. Yeah, that's the reason why I'm here. It's a little bit silly because Korea is such an amazing place that I want to explore more, and I'm here for like such a strange reason. You know, I don't have like a coherent reason for being here. So people are like, "What are you doing here?" I'm like,
Well, at least that's a lot more original than because I was a fan of K-pop or or something like that. So
have you seen an influx in tourism because of K-pop?
I think it's crazy, especially
Really?
after Korea reopened after COVID lockdown. So many tourists. I think maybe even you notice they try to even like, you know, English menus at restaurants and things like that.
Yeah.
It's becoming much more international, I think.
Like you can get around with that quite a bit.
Yeah.
You know, as you said, English menus. I feel like people that work at restaurants and whatnot have at least a basic level to be able to take your order, and in some places it's zero. So here I feel like there is an effort to accommodate to tourism. I think that's amazing. I really think Korea is an amazing country, and I feel like a lot more people should come here. When you ask people what their dream place to travel to, one of the most common answers I see is Japan. People always say Japan, at least in Europe and in the US. But I feel like Korea should be on more people's top of the list.
Well, from somebody who's traveled so much to so many different countries, I guess that means something.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess for our audience who, especially in Asia, might not have heard of you, or I mean, you're like a world famous kind of figure, but especially for a lot of Asian audience, people from Asia who may not heard of Yes Theory, how would you kind of describe the mantra or the motto of seek discomfort and like what you guys stand for as a creator?
It's a good question. We basically, because we embody a few different ideas, and so you know the The first idea is seek discomfort, right? So it's showing people the value of getting out of their comfort zone as a means to grow. The fundamental idea that the greatest experiences and the deepest connections in life exist on the other side of your comfort zone. And recently we found that there are two themes that also just have always been a part of our philosophy. So we now say there are three main themes. So that's the first one. The second one is just saying yes, like the open-minded attitude towards life. So it's not necessarily saying yes to everything, but it is saying yes to the things that scare you, the things that challenge you, the things that might get you to change or evolve your perspective about the world. And the third is love over fear. I feel like we're so almost more inclined to be driven by fear, whether it is fear of what we're seeing in the news, everything is terrible everywhere, and then, or fear of our own insecurities or our own limitations, rather than moving from a place of love. And that's a harder choice to make. I feel almost we default back to fear sometimes. So choosing love over fear means operating from a place of positivity and optimism and openness, rather than closing down and being fearful. I've really learned through these experiences of the past few years that you attract what you project. And if you put out fear, anxiety, stress out into the world, out onto people, that's oftentimes what's going to come back to you. Versus if you're able to reconnect to a different frequency, be more open, be more kind, more compassionate and patient, then I find that all of a sudden I'm finding more of those people in my life. So it is really like a shift that you can do to then start seeing real life impact in your life. So those are the three main kind of pillars of what Yes Theory stands for.
Yeah. And I think the reason why that resonates so much, at least for us as co-founders of Asian Boss, is that we similarly have three pillars.
Okay.
Which is stay curious, that you do need to understand what's going on in the world, because I heard you speaking about how divided we are all becoming as a nation, as cultures. I mean, we are technically at the brink of a World War III as we speak, with the whole Russian stuff that's going on. So we want the youth, the global youth, to stay curious, question things and why things are the way they are, and think critically for themselves, listen to different perspectives, and come to your own conclusion, rather than being all tribalistic and then you're us versus them type of thing, and then ultimately take action to do something yourself. I mean, number one, personal responsibility and accountability, but then just go beyond that to do something for the community. Like, that's exactly why we're doing all these street interviews and talking to people like you, to understand different perspectives, because otherwise we get trapped in our own echo chamber, right? When we have these type of strong kind of like purpose or vision that's driving us, kind of gives you that longevity that you can always think of something to do, rather than trying to make money or something as a creator, or being driven by that financial motivations. In kind of strange ways, like, we're doing similar things to benefit humanity as a whole, rather than trying to bring the negative energy and hate and fear to people's lives. We turn to the opposite. That's why I think we're such a huge fans of what you guys do, and it's kind of humbling to hear that you guys also heard of us as well.
I think it's amazing to the perspective you bring, and I think what you're mentioning now is exactly what I saw also in the videos. You just give people an opportunity to share, and I think that's so important.
So how many countries have you traveled to?
A good amount, but I have friends who've been to every country, so I feel like a noob next to them. In the high 60s, so almost 70. I don't know the exact number, maybe 67 or something. Yeah, in the high 60s, between 65 and 70 maybe.
Yeah.
So a good amount. But many places I go back to, like Korea I'd already been, Japan I've already been. So I'm trying to see as much of the world as I can, but I'm not necessarily attached to the idea of going to every country. So I don't mind going back if I feel like there's more for me to see there.
Like, how do you even decide on the countries? Because you were just mentioning that you don't necessarily have to go to each and every country, but then how do you decide the next destination? The world is your oyster, and you can just pick and choose.
It's partially, thinking through ideas, seeing where I have interesting places I want to visit or concepts and whatnot. But a large part of it is just where do I, like, intuitive, where do I feel like would be interesting to go to right now. Yeah, at the end of last year, I did like a Africa series. So I went to 3 different countries in Africa, and I was just very curious. I hadn't been to West Africa yet. There was this place in Somalia, which is a country that doesn't exist, called Somaliland, inside of Somalia, and I was very curious about that place. So it was just staying curious, like your slogan. It's following my own curiosity. Where do I feel excited to go to? What story do I feel like I can't stop thinking about?
Do you think topic first or country first? So do you go, okay, Japan sounds interesting, I'm going to look for 3 different topics. Or how do you do it?
It depends, I guess. Sometimes it is topic first, and sometimes it is country first. Sometimes if I'm very curious about a place or a country, I try and dig deeper and find ideas in that country. I'm trying to think of, like Colombia, for example, we went there a few years ago. We were curious about visiting it, and we just spent a few weeks digging for ideas, and then went and found a few when we were there. But sometimes it is concept driven. So Somaliland, for example, was a place that I'd heard of, and so that's what brought me there. So that was kind of a mix, I guess, because it was kind of country, but also the idea that there was a country inside Somalia that doesn't exist was interesting to me. So that was a bit of a mix. Yeah, I guess it's almost 50-50. But it is definitely like very concept driven. Like if we don't find a concept, we're not going to go and just show up and figure it out. We used to do that, but it became too stressful because once we'd committed to the trip and flown everybody there and gone hotels, and then we're like, cool, what are we filming? Like, that doesn't work anymore, you know? Like we brainstorm and we have like a log of, I don't know, over 100 ideas that we've filtered through. I mean, we've got thousands in total, but I narrow them down more and more. I say like every 10 ideas we find, maybe 1 makes it through like the filters of cutting down ideas. Yeah, so we're quite selective with the concepts. So it kind of depends, you know, if we have maybe 1 concept in a country, then we think, okay, well, to make it worth it to fly there, let's see if we can find 2 or 3 more. So then it's a concept that drove us to that place, but then the place that pushes us to find more.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit of a, I feel like the creative process is a little messier than people think. You know, there is a bit of, you're just searching, right? It's this search, but you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys feel that way
absolutely.
as well.
I think we can relate.
Yeah. How do you guys come up with, you know, your topics?
Oftentimes, I think both of us have like respective strong communities.
Yeah.
And our community are the ones that even let us know about certain topics, or hey, you guys should ask people about these type of questions. And then when we do visit, it's like we noticed that for a lot of locals, it's nothing new, yet we're like, I've never seen that before. Yeah, it's all about the perspective, right? And then that kind of gives you 10 different ideas. So like you said, creative processes are very messy, but then once you get the ball rolling, it's like, oh, okay, now I just discovered one. I can go off the little tangent and then find 10 different topics.
Totally.
So I think I'm kind of very creative in that space, that I can just come up with hundreds of topics, but then I need to kind of sit down and then just go blank for maybe a few days or something like that, and then let it just come to you.
Yeah, there is something to accessing that place, right?
Yeah.
Which is quite weird. I think if you're too much in the logistical thinking brain, at least for me, I have a hard time tapping into that idea generating brain. It feels like a very different space to me.
I think, to be fair though, that's everybody, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all caught in the daily grind of actually having to perform our duties and various roles. So I appreciate that. I think it's difficult, but it's something you can actually actively train on, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, coming up with an idea is almost like trying to fall asleep. Like if you try too hard,
yeah.
it doesn't come.
Yeah.
Or meditating. I don't know if you guys meditate, but meditations, if you sit there and you're like, I'm going to meditate. And it's like this softer approach. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sometimes I dream about it. Yeah. And then I wake up at like 3 a.m. and I have to like write down ideas.
Really?
Because that means I'm thinking about it subconsciously.
Yeah.
I think in my case, I have a picture of me when I'm 3 or 2 or 3 in the office, and I kind of aspire to be the 2 or 3-year-old me, because when you're really, really young and you look at kids, they're really playful, they're doing everything, and I almost feel like creativity is almost going back to that playful mode, and just thinking of ideas in that playful manner sometimes,
That's why we say stay curious as opposed to be curious, because we always had that ability to question everything when you're a little kid, right?
Yeah.
It's like, what's that? What's this? Why?
Yeah.
And then we gradually lose that ability as we get kind of more sophisticated.
Why do you
school.
think we lose it?
Good question, man. I think it's society in general, parents, school, education. This trying to cram stuff into your brain, and I'm sure you thought about this a lot, right?
Yeah, but it's an interesting topic because every child is curious, right?
Yeah.
Every child has endless. I don't know if you guys. I don't have children, but do you guys have children?
I have a daughter.
Okay.
Yeah,
How old is she?
she's 3.5 right now.
Okay, so she's in that peak,
Oh,
asking a million questions, or what?
Well, I can barely communicate with her because she's speaking Korean, but she loves to do everything. Like children, it's almost like they're just life.
Yeah.
They're just alive in that particular moment itself. They're just living in that moment, And the concept of time isn't really there too much for a child. So it's really interesting to just observe and learn.
It's almost like 7 years old. I don't know what age you guys think, but around that age, you start to gradually.
Yeah, you
think
so?
about
Is that
time,
about 7? Do you think?
I don't know. Maybe it's later. I don't
Yeah,
know.
the brain, I think, up to like 7 or so, it's kind of the most, how do I say it, absorbent in a way. In Japan also, they say 0 to 3, basically it kind of makes your core character about those 3 years.
That's when you form the subconscious mind, right?
Yeah,
All this like a
subconscious
self-esteem
mind,
and things like that.
self-esteem,
Yeah, I heard that too.
Yeah, there's a saying like that. And so I think there's a big chunk when there's 0 to 3, and then there's also like, 3 to 7. It's a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a good, staying curious is a great priority to have, I feel.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have patent over it or trademark registered, because that is such a common phrase.
Yeah.
We tried. Well, I guess we should kind of take a step back, because you're definitely one of the best storytellers, at least in the YouTube space or video space, and the way you're able to kind of lay everything out, just build it up the right way. I appreciate that. But for those who might not be familiar with Thomas Bragg, like, can you just take us back to like where you grew up and whether you were like a natural born storyteller, or like what were you like as a child? Were you just going all over the place, or were you kind of studious, or like what?
All over the place, kid.
Yeah.
If you come to dinner at my house with my parents, my mom will spend quite some time roasting how energetic and chaotic I was as a kid, because in a loving way. I was definitely always up to something. I feel like the job now I've found is like justifying my energy. Yeah. Growing up, I felt that until I got about 6 or 7, until school really started, I had a very youthful spirit, running around, doing a million things. And then when school started, I wasn't performing very well. And in France, they start grading you quite young. And I know that the schools in Asia are also quite strict, but the French school system is pretty rigid. I was born with dyslexia, like a mild form of it, not like super severe, but still enough to, like, my B's and D's look the same, P's and Q's. I would like miss words and sentences completely. So reading took a long time for me. And I just thought that it was because I was stupid or something. So in school for me was not super fun. It was just this dread of feeling judged and like I'm behind everybody all the time. So it took me some time to figure out my ways of learning. Like, how do I absorb this information? And it was in my teenage years that I realized, like, I need to take longer to read the material, but once I get it, I really get it. So I ended up doing quite well at the end of school, but it took me some time to get there. So I felt that I had something to prove in a strange way. When I got to university, I kind of realized that school wasn't like, academia was not the path that I wanted. I had some friends who were obsessed with school. They wanted to do masters or PhDs and whatnot, and for me, it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what.
And making videos, YouTube videos or anything like that was not?
It was not something that I'd grown up doing necessarily either, but I loved YouTube growing up. Like, it was my first love. Like, I found it quite early on in 2007, I think. So it was about a year or two after it was founded. Yeah, it just felt like my escape. Like, I could I would just go and research and find videos. And back then, you know, at no channel I'd hit 1 million subscribers yet. So
Yeah.
it was just like this super weird place where people in their bedroom were uploading skits, and it was very raw and beautiful in many ways. And so I think growing up, both my parents they're quite avid storytellers. Like my dad traveled a lot and he loves telling stories, and my mom she's very funny and creative. So she's written plays and stuff like that. So both in their own ways, they tell stories very differently. My mom has more wittiness and kind of British like sarcasm in her storytelling, and my dad's very like emotional and detailed about like the people that he met, and he builds like this image in your mind of where he was and what happened. So I think growing up I would just build their stories in my mind, you know, like fantasize about what it looked like and where they were. So when I think back, I think, you know, sitting at the dinner table listening to them, I think definitely inspired a desire to tell stories myself in some subconscious way. You know, it wasn't like a conscious thing. It was just enjoying listening to them. And then, in my early 20s, I decided, let me see what YouTube's about. And at the perfect timing, a very strange class opened up in university, where
which was in Canada, right?
In Canada, at McGill.
Yep.
In Montreal. There was the founder of Just for Laughs, which is a big, all Canadians would know it. It's a big comedy company, I guess, because they do live events, but they're also like a TV network, and they have a YouTube channel. They were kind of like the first live pranks on the street, but more wholesome. It's not like the ones that humiliate the person, but it's kind of like
or terrifying
goofy stuff.
Yeah.
And the founder of that was the teacher of the class, and they had kind of given him free reign to do whatever he wanted. So he was like, you know what, I think the future is going to be starting YouTube channels, so this class is going to be about starting YouTube channels.
Wow.
And so I had this timing of like wanting to try it, and then this gave me the perfect excuse to do it. I kind of was a little bit afraid to try, but because it was for a class, I could kind of hide behind that, even though I just really wanted to do it. And so I signed up and made my first 6 videos, and I just loved it. I loved editing. I loved spending time just thinking about ideas. Everyone complained about the editing. I could just sit there all night. It didn't matter. I was just tweaking every little thing and changing the music, and it just felt like, whoa, I think I've found my flow state, you know, the thing that I can just focus on nonstop.
So
And,
this was before the Project 30?
Yeah, this was before that. Yeah. When Project 30 came along, the idea was, after graduating, I felt that I'm looking for some sense of direction, and I felt that getting out of my comfort zone is a really good compass to follow, because what I'm afraid of, there's probably something on the other side there that I don't know yet, that I haven't understood about myself, or maybe a fear to conquer. So I decided, because I don't know where I want to go, let me use fear and discomfort as my direction. Right. And so we created this list of 30 things we've never done before that we're going to do in 30 days and make a video about it every single day. And that was kind of the framework to start this more YouTube journey more seriously. And I met Matt and Amar in very serendipitous circumstances, and they were just on board right away. Yeah, it was kind of like a mix between this personal journey of overcoming these fears and discomforts, and also a creative one, because I'd only edited 6-7 videos before that, and now I'm doing 30 in 30 days. You know, my best friend was like, do you have any idea how hard this is gonna be? And I was like, no, actually. And I definitely, it was definitely a struggle, you know, every night until 3 a.m. and then slept until like 8 or 9 and then did it all over again. So it was definitely a crazy month. I wouldn't recommend it. But it was one where I felt that it was clear to me that I had something with YouTube to explore. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if this was the final form. I didn't know how long it would take to get to the final form, but I knew that, okay, there's more for me to look at here, and I'm not done yet. And that was enough. That was just the conviction that I needed. And my parents weren't super fans that I decided to continue. They thought, okay, he's doing like a summer project with his friends, whatever. And then I'm like, yes, I'm gonna do this. And they're like, what?
But at the time, were you used to sort of filming yourself in a vlog style?
No, I was super uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah, it's very hard.
What were you using by way of equipment? Like, were you using it, because, you know, smartphones probably didn't have good enough camera lenses at the time? Yeah,
so my whole life I've been very good at saving money. Like anytime, you know, grandma would give me like $50 for like birthday, I would just save it.
Right.
like my whole life, I barely never touched that money. So I had like over $1,000 saved, and of like just different gifts that I've accumulated throughout like my teenage years into my early 20s. And then I spent quite some time researching this. I found that the Canon 70D was like the perfect camera to start with. And then I got the Rode mic, and I realized only months later that this was actually, I had no idea what I was doing. I was literally just on camera websites comparing reviews and all that. That was just within my budget, like a little bit stretching my budget, but I was like, okay, I can probably do this. Yeah, it was like the perfect starting camera. It had the flip out screen, so I could, you know, see what I'm filming, and then autofocus. Like I didn't want to have to deal with settings. I was just like, I'm trying to figure out how to tell the story, and then the settings, I'll figure it out later. So I had some friends, you know, who were telling me, you should use this camera, and it's got really good this and that. And I was like, I just want the camera to work, good autofocus, good sound, and that's it. And I just want it to look nicer than my phone. And so that was all we used for like the first year or two, I think. And it worked fine.
So Project 30, I think the reaction from that was massive, right?
It felt massive to us, but it was definitely like at the end of it, like there was a couple of videos that kind of went a little viral, like a couple 100,000 views, and the recap of it went on the front page of Reddit. So that was a bit, you know, got some noise, and we ended up in the local news in Canada and whatnot. So it felt like a lot of people were interested, but we only had like 7,000 subscribers or 8,000 subscribers.
Which is nothing to laugh at.
I mean, you know, we were proud of it, but it wasn't enough to justify the amount of risks we were taking to commit to this. Like Amar had a full ride scholarship paid for by MasterCard, one of the 2 African students selected, you know, for this like prestigious thing, and he was dropping out of that. And it's like 8,000 subscribers are not making sense for the risks we're taking right now, especially Amar. So it felt like we were burning our ships a little bit. But at the same time, it gave us such motivation to be like, now we have to make this happen. There's no way this is not working out. Like we have now made it. Like we've walked into a corner, and we're gonna have to figure our way out somehow. So we had a lot of very strong, even though there was a lot of fear and anxiety and, you know, phone calls with parents being like, what, like you should not be doing this. We had each other, and the energy we had when we were together was like, it's us versus the world, and we're gonna figure it out. It doesn't matter how hard it's gonna be or how stressful, as long as we stay together, like we'll figure it out. So that gave immense amount of drive to overcome things and to push through and to continue coming up with new ideas. And I think team is super important.
The guys you mentioned, by the way, for our audience references, they're co-founders of Yes Theory.
Yes, exactly.
And you guys had all these like different complementary skill sets. Like, for example, you're the storyteller, but then you're not exactly the business operator, right?
No,
So when you guys got together and decided to figure this out, were you guys already thinking at that point, this is gonna be like a massive business one day, or like, let's just figure it out as we go?
We definitely didn't expect it to go the way that it did, but we always were quite ambitious with how big we thought it could go. And also we didn't come up with the idea of getting out of your comfort zone. It's like an age-old stoic, you know, it's thousands of years old, right? But when we felt that there was nothing really on YouTube capturing this idea, which is universal, it felt like this is common sense, that there's a version of this which is gonna work. We just need to be the first ones to get there. In our minds, it was more a movement and like bringing a different way of thinking to people than it was business driven. It was definitely, we had ideas for business, and we knew that to sustain this and to build it, to scale it, it has to be a business. We have to figure out ways to make this make money, especially at the beginning, so we can just, you know, fully commit. But the idea was very much, how do we build something significant that can bring value into the world? And that's what we were super excited about. Even back then, we already felt quite exacerbated by the negative news cycle and like the feeling of further and further division. And we felt that there was a lack of positive storytelling on YouTube. Back then, most of the channels that were going viral were pranks that were very mean, you know, like making fun of people, or the vlogs that were like super fast paced and people screaming. And it was just, how is this the only thing accessible to people on YouTube right now, you know?
There's not many wholesome stuff.
Yeah, and people were telling us, like people literally told us positivity is not gonna go viral. Like people told us that, it's not possible. So we were like, well, damn, okay. So there's no blueprint, you know, we just have to figure out how do we do this. We eventually found a concept that we call it hide the vegetables. So it's kind of, the vegetable is the wholesome, positive aspect of the story, but you kind of package the story in like this more exciting, grander, slightly edgier concept. I think a concept needs a little bit of edge for people to be curious to click on it.
Of course.
And then you kind of rope them into this more wholesome angle, which they kind of fall into. So that's where the hide the vegetables comes in. Because if you tell them, here's a broccoli, no one's going to want to eat it. But everyone needs broccoli. So it's kind of like you kind of put a nice hamburger next to it and then you just hide a bunch of broccolis around it.
I really love that, that concept.
I think just combining everything with storytelling, it just works. Because, I mean, you can look at us and it's like, oh, news, like dry as shit, right? And then, well, no, it's when you start actually getting people's stories and present it in an authentic way, but that is not seeming like too professional or journalism type of angle. So we have this like weird hybrid model of being a creator / journalist. And we're not even a journalist.
I was going to ask, do you consider yourself journalists?
No. So
we're just like,
we did. So I did architecture, and Stephen was a lawyer.
Wow.
Yeah, and then
so no background in media, journalism, filmmaking, nothing.
And then the story is that we bought a VG90, Sony VG90, and at the really beginning we just decided, okay, we're going to commit. They're kind of very similar. We just could kind of afford it, and okay, we just bought the camera. We just know how to press the on/off button. Okay, we have full-time jobs. Let's work on Saturday and Sunday to make it work. You know?
Wow.
And because we didn't have your gift of being able to present the story, we just wanted to listen to other people. So we just wanted to.
So that was the idea from the beginning?
Okay, we just hit the streets. And then we just had something we were curious about, but nobody had anything like that on YouTube. So we're like, oh, let's ask about this. How much do you know about Korea? You know, Japan? To a bunch of people who honestly at the time thought that, probably to this day, still think that Japan is pretty much porn, Hello Kitty, Korea is K-pop, BTS, that's it, right? So we kind of find this hilarious stereotypes, whether that be positive or negative. But that's all perpetuated by the mainstream media.
Totally.
You know, and when it comes to Korea, it's all North Korea and Kim Jong-un. So, you know, people are you okay? I'm like, we're fine.
Totally.
And another thing is, I think from the really beginning, we wanted to do something more than like entertaining people or something like. We knew that there were ways to go more viral, you know, more views, etc. But we definitely wanted to have some type of an educational element, you know, so that people can get more than just, you know, not just entertainment. You know, we wanted to give value from the really beginning.
So hiding your vegetable, that's such a thing that is exactly applies to us as well, except we couldn't come up with that kind of fancy term.
It's just a funny way to say. I think many people on YouTube that ended up finding ways to make kind of more educational or wholesome content to work kind of had to do that approach, right? Yeah, YouTube is an interesting kind of game / platform to keep up with.
Especially in light of, I mean, I don't know how you feel about the latest kind of current state of social media with TikTok and Reels and Shorts. And so do you see this type of like this lack of attention span and people just becoming more and more extreme in whatever it is? Do you think that it's harder than ever to try anything wholesome, no matter how much vegetable you try to hide? Like, what do you think about the current state of what's happening?
I think it's definitely changing things, but from a creator perspective, I try not to be swayed by the platform changing. I don't know, when did you found your channel?
As channel, maybe like 9 years ago.
2013.
So you've kind of, so that's even before us. So you've seen it go through waves, right? I don't know if you feel this way, but I don't know if sometimes I feel like a YouTube grandpa. People are like, wow, you've been around for so long, you know, but I haven't been around that long, 7.5 years. But I've seen it change, you know, there's been trends that come and go. For a while it was long videos and then super short and then, so I've seen it do this before. So I try and not at least change my own strategy too much. You know, our YouTube partner was telling us, oh, you should do shorts, you should do that, do this, do that. And I was just kind of sitting there listening to it and I didn't feel compelled to do it at all. Like, I didn't want to jump in just because everybody else was.
It's a trend. Yeah.
It's a trend, yeah, and I think that the more people jump into that, the more quality long-term storytelling might be rare, and then continuing to staying in the lane that I feel I'm good at is maybe just going to serve me in the long run. And then when it comes to people's attention span, yeah, I mean, I feel my own attention span dropping. You know, with Reels, you can just sit there and do nothing, and it just feeds you what you want it. Yeah, but I think there's not much you can kind of do about that either. I just try and make sure that whatever I put out is high quality and is aware that people's attention span is not so high. So try not to make an interview, like if there's an interview section in the video, for example, with somebody that we meet, try and not make that super long or too wordy or whatnot, so that the person just drops out halfway through.
Yeah. Or at least like insert B-roll or something.
Yeah,
too.
try and make it. Yeah. But I also want to, I find it annoying when I feel that the editor doesn't respect me as a viewer, and I find that when they're cramming in edits, I feel like I'm being edited like a child is meant to watch it. There's some channels I just can't watch. It's too fast for me, you know, and I don't feel like the person respects that I can focus for long enough to listen to what they have to say. So we also try to be a little bit like keeping it fast-paced and engaging, but not trying to chop every like half second. Try and keep
That's interesting, because I think maybe a lot of American teenagers might disagree with you on that.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure we can get, like, I'm sure Mr. Beast would roast our editing with, you know, there's a 3-minute interview in the middle, like what? And it's like, yeah, but it brings value to the piece that I'm trying to make, so it is what it is. You know, I'm sure you could get more views if you cram in more or cut down more, but I think at some point you have to kind of choose what lane you're in and be at peace with it. For me, at least, that's what I've come to terms with, is the platform is changing, people's attention span is maybe dropping, but strangely enough, our highest performing videos have been like the 40-minute plus ones. Which is like bizarre, right? Like every time we upload a 40-minute plus video, it's the highest performing one. And usually it means also that the scale was quite much larger, right? So there's also a correlation with that.
I really liked it when you made the video about Instagram, of not using Instagram or social media in general for 30 days. And I think at the end of the video, you were saying you just delete Instagram and then, you know, just download it again when you need it. And that from that video, I started to apply that, actually.
Wow.
Yeah, because I just realized that when you look at Reels or Shorts, or sometimes your brain kind of gets numb when you just looking at it, and then you start to be less focused, for example, or at least for me, I become a little bit less focused on things, distracted a little bit more if you consume it for too long of a time. So I just try to not go down that spiral in the first place by trying to avoid it. And avoid it is take out their app.
That's an interesting perspective for me, because I don't know, maybe because of my legal background or whatnot, I can stop it whenever I want. So I don't have to delete the app in its entirety. But maybe, I do think it's extremely addictive. I can see, especially young people, just doing that all day long.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I just think, I just don't want to, you know, waste time in a sense. I want to use that time productively. I'd rather probably try to listen to an audiobook and learn something as a concept, and then, you know, utilize that.
We're both crazy personal development junkies.
I love it.
So we're literally just like...
Is there a book recently that struck you as quite powerful?
I just finished, because we had to interview her, although we got a lot of like criticism for it. We had to interview Yeonmi Park, a former North Korean defector. And I just read books like crazy, and then Kate listens to audiobooks all the time.
I really liked the book like Breath, you know, from James
Nestor.
Amazing book.
Oh, you did with the Wim Hof and the breathing thing.
Wim is a legend.
And I started taking cold showers. I mean, it's been a while. So like the routine is that just wake up 5 a.m.
You wake up at 5 a.m.?
Yeah, and then just work out on an empty stomach, just heavy strength training, and then take cold shower.
Damn.
Ice cold shower.
How do you keep the discipline for the 5 a.m.?
I think it's just building the right habit, which K is also big on. So you just build the right habit,
Yeah.
and then your body can just wake up without even the alarm thing.
And are you never tempted if a friend is like, want to hang out, tonight, or go out or whatever, and
I think just making commitment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you got to go to bed at like 10 or 9 or what?
Doesn't 11, 12, 1 sometimes. So
Really?
Yeah.
Just to say, I'm not waking up at 5 a.m.
That's just me. That's just me. Okay.
Because I tried, when I was surfing, I was waking up at 6 in California, but then you have to just commit. It's like, well, past like 9:30, I'm starting to wind down, and then, because otherwise,
Yeah.
when I go in sleep deprived brain, I'm making bad decisions, personally at least. Yeah.
I was trying the first thing in the morning gym. It just didn't make me happy. I tried it for like over a month or so, and then
I'm miserable right now.
and I understand that there's so many benefits for doing it, but at the same time, I'm just kind of attuned with my emotions. That it's
Of
like,
course.
is this making me happier
Yeah.
in life? On a minus 15-degree morning, waking up at 5, which is great discipline, but
It's not fun. It's not fun, but I think once you build the habit,
yeah.
and then you stick by it
It's
long enough-
fulfilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty good feeling.
Yeah.
I don't know if you go to that extreme, but I'm sure you've
Trying to keep up with habits, but when I'm traveling, it's like, well, my routine's out
exactly
the window.
you travel.
Like, there's
a lot.
no.
I don't
yeah.
travel that much.
Okay.
So
Yeah. That's the thing is, I have a bit of a routine when I'm home, but when I'm traveling, it's kind of, I try and work out and meditate when I can. I try to meditate every day and then work out, try and book hotels that have gyms, and then sneak in there at some point and do a session, but it's hard to keep up when you're jumping around a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
When you were in college though, and now you embark on this Yes Theory journey as a company with all your co-founders, did you know that you'll be traveling so much all over the world, like especially in parts of Asia, where back then, I don't know how familiar you were with Asia in general.
Mm-hmm.
Were you kind of always curious about the distinct Asian cultures or particular Asian
Absolutely.
countries you wanted to visit?
I think Asia was actually the continent I was most curious about when we first started traveling, because it was the place where I was telling you my dad traveled and told stories. It was all around Asia actually.
Right.
So, yeah, he like snuck into Myanmar at the time in the 80s when it was closed, and like got into China and Vietnam and Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. So he went all around, mostly Southern Asia, but a bit everywhere. So those stories inspired me a lot and made me very curious to come and see just the diversity. We say Asia, but it's such a massive continent that there's so many different places to see. Basically, when I was 21, I paused for a second and I realized, okay, I have 9 years before I turn 30. So that's a good amount of time. And I paused and asked myself, what do I want my 20s to embody? And I had 3 themes that kept coming up. Travel was the first one. I want to use my 20s to see as much of the world as possible. The second one was creativity. I want to find a way to be more creative. I felt that school, although it gave me discipline, it did not necessarily provide me with the most amount of creativity. And the third was I wanted to have something that would have a positive impact on the world. I felt that if I get a bit restless if I feel like what I'm doing doesn't really have a purpose beyond myself or my own enjoyment.
Yeah.
And then I kind of wrote down all the different jobs that I could think of that had those 3 different criteria. So I was like, okay, maybe I can teach English abroad or teach French abroad, or maybe I could volunteer, or I could be a journalist, or I could, maybe work remotely and travel while I do that, or try to come up with all these different job titles. And then YouTube was in there. That was back when I just only made a handful of videos. And then I asked myself, if risk wasn't a question, which one would I want? And kind of to my surprise, YouTube landed first, and I couldn't rank anything else above it. If like tomorrow, boom, this is my job, YouTuber was the number one. And since that moment, I just realized, well, this is 100% what I need to be doing. And so travel was always a part of the equation, and YouTube was kind of a way to get there and fulfill the 2 other ideas that I wanted, which was creativity and then purpose. And now I have the immense luxury to be able to tell stories that I feel are meaningful and travel to places that I'm curious about.
Yeah. and then have a huge community behind you too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and to feel that what we've put out has brought people together and connected them for around a message that's bigger than just my name.
Yeah.
And you know, the channel name is not my name, right? It's Yes Theory, it's not Thomas Bragg. And for that reason, I think it can bring people together in a way that doesn't feel like we're just fans of this thing, but we actually connect over something bigger, the philosophy that is underlying in the videos. And that's been super, super fulfilling.
Now, when you talk about like living your purpose, again, not many people in their 20s especially think about wanting to bring some sort of a positive impact on the world, or you know, they just care about, like, especially you look at a lot of, you know, young people in Asia. Life is tough, man, and you gotta like work and make money, and then they stress out about getting their job, their first job, well-paid jobs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, like, do you think it's inherently sort of within you, or is it like how you're raised? Like, how do you think you're able to come to that point where you just wanted to do something bigger than yourself?
I mean, I definitely consider it a privilege to have had the time to think about this. I had a part-time job, so my parents stopped supporting me after college, so it was on my own dime that I took this time, but I was just more so projecting myself far into the future and thinking about what kind of life do I want to design for myself. You know, I had the option of going the more traditional path and getting a traditional job, but I pictured myself in that place, and I could just tell it wasn't going to work. Like, I'd had a few jobs, and I'm just not a good employee. Like, I'm just not a good one. Like, I can work really hard if I'm motivated and connected to what I'm doing, but if I'm not, I just kind of don't want to do it. So I consider it more like I don't really have a choice. I have to do this. And when I tried to make videos that didn't feel like they had a larger purpose, over time I felt a bit disconnected from them. Like, it was fun in the moment, but then afterwards I was like, okay, this is a lot of work, and I don't really know why I'm doing this, just for my own self to get a giggle. Like, it's not really where I see myself wanting to go in the future. So I'm not sure. I think it's probably a combination of my parents encouraging me to think about what I want to do with my life in a good way, and then I guess my own trial and error. You know, I was very much in a trial and error mentality early on, just trying as many things as possible. From 18 to 21, I tried to start like 4 or 5 different businesses, one that I worked on for a couple of years, and then others that I just tested for a few months, find some friends to build a prototype. We looked at it, we're like, nah, this ain't good. And I'm just like, okay, next idea. Just based on where do we feel most driven to pursue, basically. I was quite fortunate enough to be around venture capitalists in Silicon Valley early on for my first business. And the first question that they ask is, why are you doing this? And if you don't have a good reason, if it's I want to make money or I want to build a successful company, they just know that that's not going to get you far enough for the years where you're going to struggle. Like, you need to have something bigger. And I just remembered that during those years of trial and error with these businesses, I didn't have a good why. You know, I kind of made one up, but my why was, I don't know, I kind of wanted to try and build a business. That was my real why. When I found YouTube, it felt more genuine, it felt deeper, and I didn't feel like I had to come up with a reason for why I'm doing it. I just wanted to pursue it. Yeah. And the philosophy of seeking discomfort I felt was super powerful. And so at the beginning, it was almost like trial and error. It was like, let me see if I can do this and see if it actually works and if I enjoy it. And when it did, then it was just, okay, well, now we have the Yes Theory. We have the theory. Let's spread it to people and see if more people will relate and connect with this idea. So my dad is definitely, both my parents are, I'd say, role models in their own way. But my dad, growing up, committed to building a business that does cancer diagnosis. So he took a huge risk, took a huge loan, and struggled for quite a few years. So in my childhood, I remember a few years of very stressed out dad, unfortunately. But I was also very inspired by the commitment that he was doing to build something with purpose. And it was after his best friend passed away from a skin cancer that could have been cured if he'd had the right diagnosis. Wow. But unfortunately, so many people don't even get the right diagnosis. So they get the wrong medication and then they pass away when they could have lived. You know, hearing him talk about his purpose and having seen him struggle and then eventually succeed was also inspiring for me to see that purpose can be a very nourishing experience in life. That gave me a good blueprint, to think about, okay, I could compare the choices that he's made with choices other people have made, and a choice of purpose made so much more sense to me than one of, I'm just gonna pursue a career just because I feel like I kind of have to, or XYZ reason. Amar and I, for example, Amar, who's one of the other co-founders of Yes Theory, come from very different backgrounds. He didn't really have his dad has a farm in Egypt. He's the first to go to university. So he really does not come at all from like a background of having had an education, like expected of him or given to him. He earned it all his way, and to make this choice was definitely a gamble, but I think it was just all of us feeling deeply connected to what we could build together.
Yeah.
And we could all visualize it. We could all see it in our minds, what this could become. And so when you have that fire within you, it's just impossible to stop.
What's the most proudest video that you created? Because I think probably it's something which is aligned with your purpose as well. Which one would it be?
It's like a choose your favorite child.
I can never answer this question.
It could be a couple.
Like, what's your favorite video? I'm like, I don't know, everything.
I have a few that do mean a lot to me in different ways. I'd say my stories in like Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and Somaliland were very meaningful because they're parts of the world that only get a very negative aspect of their story told. And to go and tell a more human part of the story was fulfilling and scary. I had people from those countries tell me not to come, and I had locals who had left, who had fled those countries telling me you shouldn't go, and pushback from some friends and family on some of them, and it is, in some people's eyes, they can see me as a target, right, of kidnapping or whatever. And so there was some fear definitely involved.
Well, let's talk about Syria then.
Yeah.
What does the process even involve for you to be able to go to Syria in the first place?
Yeah.
So for example, we would love to cover more stories from Syria, and we have all our freelance reporters and correspondents in different countries. Well, guess what? I don't know if many people know this, but Syria is actually one of those countries that the Korean government can't even do like international banking with. So we cannot even pay people in Syria, even if they do work for us, because the banks, they do not transact with Syria. So then what are you supposed to do, pay people in Bitcoin or or Ethereum, So it's that strict. So how do you actually go to Syria in the first place?
I've been thinking about it for a few years before going, and I found this guide on Instagram. Her name is Gaida, actually, and just fascinated by her story and her pictures, and she would share that she would take people there, and she took a friend of mine there. So that planted the curiosity, and I'd followed her for a few years, and we kept talking, and during COVID they closed, so it wasn't a possibility. And when they reopened, it was kind of like, okay, let's figure out how do we get there. And luckily for Swedish or French passport holder, there is like a visa application process, so they have to screen you. That takes a few weeks. Once you're accepted, which I don't know who they accept and who they don't accept, but Americans can't go, for example. But if you're European, you can. I think, what passports do you guys hold?
Well, first of all, I know for a fact that people in our team, like German passport, Japanese passport, they're probably the most powerful passports in the world, right?
I think they could go, yeah. I think it's only mostly Americans and maybe a handful of others that can't. Yeah, you basically then have to fly in through Lebanon, because there aren't really many flights that go into Syria, and then you drive across the border, and there's like 20 checkpoints.
Wow.
First Lebanese checkpoints. And they're like, "You're really going?" It's like, yeah.
And it's like then, heavily secured in terms of guns and everything, right?
And as you get closer, it's quite a sad approach, because tons of refugee camps in Lebanon. So you see like kids literally playing on the highway. Like it's a crazy sight as you get closer. Wow. And they're treated quite poorly. They're all like crammed in these camps and pretty bad living conditions, and you see that as you drive through it.
Are you allowed to film that type of thing, or not?
So I didn't really film those. I kind of filmed it a little bit from the car, but we didn't stop or anything, because it is a bit complicated. I'm not sure. You probably could, but you might need permits. I also think some people in those camps probably wouldn't be too happy to be filmed.
Yeah.
But yeah, then when you arrive into Syria, it's yeah, there's some things like maybe can say and maybe some I can't.
Sure.
But you have to transact a little bit with some of the guards, and that helps.
How much?
Yeah, so that just helps speed up the process, so they don't, check too much on what I have in my bag filled with camera gear and whatnot. And there's about 15 checkpoints to get into the city. And then you arrive in Damascus, and I started in Old Damascus, which is actually beautiful. It's also quite a bit destroyed, but mostly it's been kept intact. But the outskirts of the city were, it was definitely the hardest thing I've ever witnessed, when you realize that these were neighborhoods that were inhabited. Like, the level of destruction is impossible to describe or comprehend. You get there and it doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
It looks like just an abandoned city.
Yeah.
That was maybe never finished, but actually people lived there, and it's just been destroyed. So nothing can really psychologically prepare you.
Yeah. Were you like the only pretty much white guy there?
Yeah. I think I saw a handful of other tourists, but not too many. I mean, in some ways it was beautiful because the locals were so eager to connect with the outside world. And I didn't get this until the end of the trip, but I asked the guide, like, why are they all so happy to see me everywhere I go? Everyone is so happy. And she said, actually, seeing you to them represents hope, because it means that maybe things are getting safer if foreigners dare to come here with a camera and walking around on the street. And it's hard not to tear up, in those moments. And all of the interactions that I had to that point just had so much more meaning and depth afterwards, right?
So people are still really struggling.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But they still try to hold on to hope. They're immensely strong and kind humans, like genuine kindness. They come up on the street and they just want you to come to their house and eat and have tea, and they're insisting, they're like, please come to my house. And we're like, well, we're going right now, but thank you, Yeah, it was powerful experience in empathy building, because growing up, living in Europe, the first time I really heard about Syrian people was through the refugee crisis when they came. We saw many in France and in Sweden, the two countries that I'm from. Sweden accepted hundreds of thousands. I know that millions in total, refugees, or over 1 million, but I don't know how many from Syria, but I think very many. I met many people in Syria. I was like, oh, my cousin, he's in Sweden. I was like, cool, man. So I felt an immense desire to connect, and all of them, a very strong desire from everyone that I met to have a sense of normalcy in their life. All of the early 20s people and teenagers just basically mostly remember their life or childhood during war. They just want to live, especially now that you have social media, they can see how others are living. They just want to be able to buy a plane ticket and not be denied because they think you're leaving and never coming back. They want to be able to, transact with the world and exist. And right now people they're still quite stuck.
Do you know what the latest is on, because I know they were also affected by the recent earthquake.
Yeah. I mean, it's just
and we never hear about them, right? That's the thing in the mainstream media. You hear about Turkey a little bit.
Yeah.
But then what about the Syrian side?
It was devastating because so they've been sparred or blocked by the international community to receive any transactions and aid. It's a sanction on the government, which is beyond my opinion, but that's what they've done. And so now during this crisis, Turkey was able to receive a lot more aid than Syria, even though Syria was struggling equally, if not as much, since they had no resources. Yeah. So it was quite devastating for Syria, and they just felt quite hopeless because they're already a country struggling economically. They don't have aid. So I had a few friends who lost friends in the earthquake. So it was mostly the northern side, and most of the people I know lived in Damascus. But it did touch a bit of the coast as well. And it's hard to not feel, you just actually witness how unfair a lot of the world is. Just because I was born here, I have a passport that allows me to go everywhere, and you're born here and you can't go anywhere. The feeling of passport privilege and just privilege in general was very real when you go to those places. And I try not to see it from, I think a lot of people, this topic of privilege is a bit tricky because it comes sometimes with guilt and shame, you know, like, oh, you're privileged. But I think it should be more from a humility standpoint and gratitude for like, damn, I have privileges in my life that I get to enjoy, and I thus want to try and use my privilege to hopefully make other people's lives better in some way, shape, or form with what I have in my toolkit of being able to influence the world. But it is definitely tough. You know, you leave a place like Syria and your friends are still there. And not everyone wants to leave, but they all would like to be able to have the freedom to go somewhere and come back.
So they don't have that freedom because of the government?
Yeah, so their passport is very bad. It's very hard to, it's I think the second to worst, if not, I think now Afghanistan is the worst passport, and then Syria and Iraq. So you can, but it's very difficult. One, from the government standpoint, to let you leave because they think when you're leaving you might never come back. And then from the other country standpoint as well, they don't want to let you in because when you get in you might immediately seek asylum and then not go back. So a lot of countries don't want to even grant you the tourist visa to leave.
Wow.
And then obviously budget as well. Not all, like everyone struggles a bit with work, so not everyone can buy a expensive plane ticket, and then you got to get the car to cross into Lebanon and do all these things. So
logistically challenging, just legal restrictions.
yeah.
I think, I mean, it's hard not to think and get political about this, but I think a lot of people also confuse the fact that there's the government and there's its people, which is separate, right? So just because you just said that there's a sanction against the government, but at the end of the day, it's the ordinary citizens that suffer.
Yeah.
Because they don't, I mean, natural disasters happens everywhere, but why should they suffer because of the government?
Yeah.
Just sad, I think.
Yeah, and it's very sad, and I mean it is a problem that, you know, I heard from everybody there struggles with it. You know, they can't get, as you said, I don't think anyone can really send international wires directly to Syria. They don't have proper banking system that really functions internationally, so they're very restricted, and it makes, if you want to visit there, you have to basically just bring a ton of cash because you can't take any out when you're there. Yeah, you know, I just hope that the next generations of Syrians will have more freedom, more prosperity. But with this earthquake, it was just like, yeah. When I already know firsthand how hard it's been, then seeing this, it was just like, damn, they really can't catch a break. Yeah, I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to go and the privilege to try to capture a bit of their story. And ultimately, what I have to remember when I go there is it's not my story, so I also have to be very attentive to what people are telling me. And although I can share a bit of my perspective, I also want to honor the fact that Syrians particularly don't get their story told fairly quite often. And it's a very, just talking about Syria can be divisive within Syrians.
We've been told it many, many times.
Yeah.
Just by bringing it up,
Oh yeah.
all of a sudden we are the bad guys.
Yeah. I mean, I had people tell me not to post the video like on different sides of the conflict, just because they thought just making a video, just having gone to Syria was political.
Yeah.
Just having the fact that I went was a political decision. You know, and I want to respect that opinion as well. But that's what makes it quite stressful at times when you go to these conflict zones, because they're still active, right? They're not done, and there's no consensus on what is happening, or in another Westerner's perspective is like, people are worried about it because I'm never going to fully absorb or understand or empathize with how the locals there are truly feeling.
Yeah.
So I can only do my best to be there for a short period, and then with my short glimpse, try and tell their story more than mine. So when I go to these places, I almost use your guys' approach a bit more of, let me just let them talk. Like, I can speak a little bit, but my opinion feels a little bit irrelevant in this moment. I would rather highlight their voices because those are the ones that people don't always get to hear.
Yeah.
I think that's what's beautiful about letting people speak, right? I think if you are only watching the world through the lens of the news, it looks very different than when you look at it from the lens of the humans who are living in that place.
You totally get it, and I think that's exactly why we do what we do.
Yeah.
But I guess my question then becomes, because you've seen so much, you just started out as this like fun-seeking, challenging yourself, but then the more you put yourself in situations like Syria, I mean, and I'm sure Syria is not the only country.
Yeah.
You've been to many parts of the world where people just do not have access to the same level of freedom or information or whatnot. Do you feel almost like a little burdened by that sense of responsibility to give them their voices because you're in that position, and whether people like it or not, you are that guy now, right? Or do you kind of feel a little bit burdened by that, or do you feel like, no, I'm only just a human. Let me just go do what I do, and can still sleep at night.
Yeah.
Because for me personally, I think this is actually a bit of a downside. It changes you as a person. I feel like I'm no longer the same person that I was even like 5-10 years ago. That I feel like I have this so much burden and this whole world on my shoulder, whether that be from a founding a company perspective, or have the sense of responsibility and duty to feel like we still haven't done so much. There's still so much more to be done, and I feel like people just look up to you to do something about it. And I don't know, that just kind of weighs me down a little bit. That I'm just a guy. I'm just only a one person, but at the same time, somebody has to do this.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you feel it's pressure from the outside world, or do you think it's?
I think it's a bit of both. The expectation that I have on myself,
Yeah.
because I feel like I'm capable of doing more. But at the same time, it is that external pressure. But at the same time, criticism and even praise. It doesn't mean that they just want more from you, right? Oh, great! Keep up with the good job. Please do more for us.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of wrestle with that?
I relate a bit to what you're saying, for sure. I think there are times where I definitely feel a lot of pressure, and
Because so many people look up to you now, right?
yeah, I mean it was interesting. I was talking to my friend about this today, actually, just how to deal with when people come up to us, and I developed this. I kind of tune out sometimes, not tune out, but I have a little bit of a hard time to receive certain compliments or people telling me things on the street, because kind of added a bit to the pressure, when somebody says how much what one story or one other meant to them, and it's like, okay, damn, wow, okay, that's a lot, that's deep, the interpretations that they took from it, and I love it, that's amazing, brings meaning and purpose to the work, but I've had to grow up more comfortable with the pressure. I think at the beginning it was very difficult. I developed social anxiety, even though I've always been a pretty open and extroverted person. I just hated going out in public. I don't know why. I just kind of got worried that I had to perform, or I had to be constantly this open, extroverted guy, whereas sometimes I'm just in a mood to go for a walk and not talk to anyone.
Yeah.
So that was a bit difficult. I think when it comes to these larger stories, those ones I definitely have to space them out, because it does weigh on me a lot. I do have some sleepless nights where I'm like, what if I mess this up? But at the same time, I like the pressure. I like feeling that I have to use every ounce of my mind and my heart at the same time to make this meaningful and thoughtful, and like it represents what I felt when I was there, and something that I know most people from this country will be able to stand behind. Because my goal is not political. I'm not here to voice my political opinion or make a statement, and I also don't think that there'll be much value in that, because it's so much more complicated than whatever I could interpret in a week. So I feel that the value that I can bring is making people feel connected to the humans there in the same way that I felt connected to the humans there. So that's what I try and focus on. And as long as my story feels that it does that, then I feel like I've succeeded. So I've had to disconnect a little bit from the pressure and the burden, and I want the videos to perform, but I don't think too much about, I try not to think about how many people that really represents or people's expectations. I try not to get too hung up on it, but there are definitely certain videos where I know that the topic or the place is sensitive, and I know I'm gonna get some people that are mad at me just for making a video there. And I just kind of have to disconnect from that and accept before I put it out that as long as I haven't totally messed up the messaging and there's a wave of negativity involved in how the story was interpreted, then I've done okay, So,
were there times when you felt like you were unfairly criticized, or people misinterpret what you guys were trying to do, and then face some sort of backlash as a result? Or you guys been relatively controversy-free?
Luckily enough, we have been relatively, there's very few instances. There was one time last year when we the way that we decided to fund our documentary, Project Iceman, which was like our most ambitious project. We'd invested so much into it. We decided to do it through, we wanted to be initially just tickets that would give you access to like an online kind of community. And then during the NFT craze, we thought, why not just use the blockchain technology to give people tokens to access this community?
You know, funny enough, we were actually thinking exactly the same thing, and we actually decided against it in the last minute. But we did see that video, but it made sense. It actually made total sense.
Yeah, and we just didn't like, we were a little bit, I think maybe in a bubble of people excited about the technology, not necessarily like the whole buying and selling JPEGs, but more so like the way that it could enable a community in the back end of it. Because it wasn't even like tradable JPEGs, so there wasn't any of the scamming part of the NFT thing. You know, you couldn't resell it for a higher price. It was literally just buying into the community. But people just, instead of listening to how the video was broken down, they just attacked the idea. That was super hard. That was like the first time we really hit. We felt like, not like the people on the surface, you know, some random person watching the video getting upset, but actually our core community. That was difficult, you know, of sitting with that and accepting that, okay, either the messaging or our decision or both just failed in this moment. We kind of, you know, we initially wrote and kind of recorded a response, but felt that we're just explaining our decision, and people that were upset are they're not gonna be, we're just gonna make this worse, right? Like, so we just decided to, those who got it, contribute and join the community, and those who didn't, just didn't. And then we released like another alternative if people still wanted to support the film. But that was a bummer because we just we felt like there was a gap of understanding between us and the audience. And to some extent, I also understood why people were upset, because a lot of people did get scammed with NFTs. So it wasn't like an unfounded fear.
I think maybe you guys were a little too early, because I do believe that this whole tokenization of the communities are coming, because you do have to put a value on the communities you guys do own. But I think maybe the technology is not there anymore yet, or there hasn't been any successful use cases with enough utility that it's going to effectively overpower the speculative forces of the market. But it's something that we are seriously considering. I mean, it's a perfect fit for us, creators and communities like us, but we just don't know what the best way forward is. So
Do you think that this is what leads a lot of YouTube creators to burn out?
Absolutely. Actually, to be fair, I don't know how many creators are this purpose-oriented or this vision-oriented, because even when we quit our respective jobs at the very beginning, we were like dead clear on what we wanted to do in terms of adding that sort of like positive impact on humanity. I mean, even now, I think we have to make this mission statement a bit clearer, but it is literally to prevent World War III if we're not too late. So to that end, we're willing to do anything and everything. That's why the third pillars of our thing is to take action, to just bring, if you cannot prevent the world war yourself, just bring your local community together, talk, understand each other, and, you know, just debate. Because I just don't think people don't even have that habit of, they just don't know how to talk to one another.
I think for me, you know, I love Asian bosses, you know, vision and mission. And I think at least for me personally, I just try to think, okay, what kind of value do I want my daughter to have, and what do I want to actually teach her, you know? And I think that kind of gives me an additional personal drive to what type of content I want to create too. And then by giving her value, I'll be giving value to, you know, a lot of other people too in the future. But to answer your question, or regarding the burnouts, I think it really kind of is there kind of a bigger, you know, vision or mission that you might, which is almost pulling you, that you're doing something? Because if you're just focusing on, let's say, yourself, maybe the burnout might occur faster rather than something which is bigger than you and kind of, you know, pushing you towards a particular North Star.
Totally agree. Yeah, that's a good point.
Have you experienced burnout? I mean, I did see your video, because, you know, I think you did for the first time maybe in a long time or never, but you said that you went through like a mini depression or something like that.
Yeah.
Especially, and would love to know how the whole business or the company was affected by COVID, because people, they think of yes theory, they have certain expectations that it's all about travel, but then that's one thing that you guys actually couldn't do during this period of lockdown.
Yeah,
So
we were the most anti-COVID thing. Talking to strangers and travel is like our thing, and both of those things were not possible.
What was the biggest struggle that you went through throughout this yes theory journey?
It was definitely this COVID period. I think it was a time where we felt very existential, just about our future. It was so many headlines about we're gonna deal with this for years. We are still dealing with it, but the struggle felt like this could end us. If we don't really have an alternative, and we weren't very unsure about what else we could do if this isn't gonna be possible for some time. And during that time, Matt, one of our co-founders, just felt that he'd kind of done everything he wanted to do with YouTube and was ready to explore other avenues. So writing is like a form of storytelling he's pursuing right now. And he just felt that the hamster wheel that you kind of end up in YouTube he was kind of done with that being the guiding force of his life. I'm still very much in it. If I don't feel like if this week it's just not gonna work, we just push it by a week and that's fine. I'm not super hard on myself as we used to be, because I think you definitely burn out after a while and you get to a point where you're like, I just want to live a life where I can have a little bit more control, and I don't want the algorithm to be the thing guiding my decisions. So it was a scary time because we'd always done everything, the three of us. We'd learned how to make decisions, the three of us together. So Matt wanted to step away. We didn't know what kind of videos we wanted to film. We tried to film a few things indoors. We hated it and they didn't perform, so it wasn't working. We'd lost all the sponsors for that period because marketing budgets were dropping, or just the other ideas that we had didn't really click with them. So it was a scary time. I think it was the first time I really felt like a complete loss of control. I feel like I've always felt a level of instigation where I've been able to, okay, if I work hard enough, it doesn't always work out, but I can always push through to some extent. And here it was, there was nothing I could do. And in many ways, that I also made me think of, people born in countries where they can't just do what I've done in my life. They were by default restricted, and that's what I'm getting to experience now. So it gave me a lot of empathy for people who grew up in different circumstances where now, like, you can't just take a flight and travel. You can't come up with an idea and go film it. Like, that's been an immense privilege and luck that I've had in my life to be able to do. And now we're sitting there with pressure because we have about 10 employees that all need to, continue getting paid and need something to do. And we have no ideas, nothing's working. So luckily we had some savings from, 2019 was a good year. So we wanted to keep everyone and keep paying them. But it was a scary time because we were just digging into our savings and we got quite close to very little because it took longer than we thought to recover.
And as a founder, what's going through your mind?
Yeah, I was terrified. I was also just very hard on myself, and feel like I've always been an optimistic person, and this was the first time I felt completely unoptimistic about everything. I felt that I was becoming, I just was more in a rut all the time. I'd kind of sleep in but wake up and feel like I never actually rested, and I was just more distracted, I wasn't
exactly
present.
How that feels like.
Yeah. And I wasn't great in my relationship. I was a bit, distant and just kind of avoidant. I just didn't know how to get out of this rut. And I think if I were to do it again, I'd change a lot of things, but it was just, unprecedented, the level of fear and uncertainty around the world that, when nobody had answers and every day was just like a new thing coming up, it was a scary time. I just didn't feel emotionally mature enough to figure out how to cope with that level of stress and uncertainty. So definitely a couple of years of a lot of anxiety and stress and struggle. I'd say 2020 was more depressive struggle, and then 2021 was trying to rediscover what is it that we're doing here, because we'd almost spent a year without being able to make the videos we wanted to do. So it was a bit of searching and experimenting, and some things worked, some things didn't work. And then last year was, okay, I feel like I've figured out what I like doing, the types of stories I want to pursue, and they're a bit more serious and intense than what I used to do, you know, but I felt those are the videos that I feel excited to go after. So that's kind of what I tried to focus on, and tried to sprinkle in some of the more positive, taking strangers on adventures and that kind of thing.
Interesting. So now you're more into the serious type of stuff.
Yeah. I've enjoyed traveling to places where I feel like I can tell almost like a mini documentary about the place, and I feel that that's where my creative juices really get going, and those are the edits and the stories I like to write the most, even though I still enjoy, you know, some of the more lighthearted stories. Yeah, I think the short documentary is kind of where I feel most at home right now, because it's kind of like exploring this space, right? Like you're searching in a room and you find a corner that you enjoy, and it's like, I'm gonna hang around this corner for a while until I get bored and I want to look for something else. It's kind of like how I've been feeling about my creative pursuit.
You pretty much like answered the question that I was gonna ask.
Okay.
Is because at some point when you keep on, even though you love storytelling, if you keep on just traveling and just do things, doesn't get a little bit repetitive, and then you start losing that drive where you feel like, yeah, I mean, as exciting as it is to visit a new country, to try activities, because you've done so many different challenges, and then, you know, it's like, okay, now I feel like I need to evolve somehow.
Yeah.
And then now you talk about, oh, now I feel like doing more serious stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like, do you see that as a natural evolution of
Absolutely.
you as a creator? Yeah.
I think so. I think in most creativity, I feel that musicians as well, right? If you just keep doing the same thing, people eventually get bored. And if you innovate too drastically, people might be a bit lost or confused as to where you're going. So I always try and see it as like almost having 10% creativity in every piece. Like, how do I stretch myself a little bit? Sometimes you can maybe dial up a little bit, maybe back down, but just basically trying to keep that level of experimentation a bit fluent, so that one day you don't wake up and you realize that you hate the format that you're stuck in, and then now you're gonna go do something totally different, right? Like people that did pranks or whatever who are like, okay, well now I'm gonna do lifestyle videos, and those don't connect, right? So for me, it's been definitely a gradual evolution, and listening to what stories that I enjoy being a part of, and then editing the most. That's kind of how I've seen it. And at the beginning, when I went to like Afghanistan or whatever, people were like, "What? This isn't Yes Theory. Like, what is this? Like, this isn't what I subscribe to." And those can be a bit scary, you know, the comments where you feel like people don't get it. But I just accepted that if I don't do this, and then when we went backwards, you know, I feel like people didn't enjoy it. You know, they didn't actually want us to just keep doing what we've always done. They want you to evolve, but there's always going to be a bit of friction when you do. And I think that's almost when you know you're in the right direction.
Interesting.
So I try and, for me, it really is intuitive. Do I feel excited to do this, or do I feel like drained or indifferent? I think indifferent is actually a more dangerous feeling than fear or discomfort.
I agree.
Because when you're indifferent, it's like, okay, especially in a creative space, that means this is not good. This is not the direction. If you're uncomfortable or a little bit scared, that might be, okay, we might be pushing some buttons here, but this is maybe the right place to go, actually. So I try and listen to that. Which feeling is it? And I've ended up filming things where I felt indifferent, and that's when I'm like, okay, I gotta fix those dials a little bit. And typically I know in how engaged I am on the editing side, if I really cared or not. You know, when it's a story I cared about, I want to be a part of it throughout. And when I'm like, it's all right, you know, then I come in at the end and tweak and write the voiceover and whatever, but I'm not as deeply involved.
Do you think it's possible, with the type of storytelling ability you have, to outsource the editing part? Do you think you'll be 100% satisfied that somebody else, if you teach them or something, or whether they get it or not, that's another question, but do you think that somebody else will be able to edit a particular video or a story in ways that you would be 100% satisfied with? Because then there's a question of scale, right?
Yeah.
Because
totally.
Do you edit everything yourself still to this day?
No, so I don't edit anymore.
Okay.
So I used to edit everything at the beginning, and then the past few years we have trained Tommy and Cam, who are amazing editors and who really get it. I'm still very much involved, like quite a few rounds of notes, and I write the voiceovers, but they've become more and more comfortable at taking an edit to 80% on their own, and then the last 20% I really get involved and I tweak a lot of things with them. But I'm quite lucky that, yeah, got two super creative editors to work with, and Amar is also very good at notes and direction. So when he's involved in the video, we'll take turns at notes. So I think it is possible to train, but I don't think I could. I think it's quite hard to have somebody that you can just give it to do the whole thing, because the voiceover is very much, I think it's hard to write it, especially if you weren't there. If you were there, there are certain nuances and tones and feelings that only you could be connected to. And there was a period where we let the editors write the voiceovers, and I just felt the video lacked. It's not that they're not good writers. It's just that there was a few, my specific perspective was kind of needed. The outro, the ending voiceover is usually a reflective one.
Yeah.
And when they were writing it, they were kind of trying to interpret what I got from the experience rather than, me writing it. They're amazing storytellers as well. But then they need me just for the details and the tone and the emotion behind some of the things that were experienced to really bring the piece together. But they do the grunt work of cutting through the footage and picking the right pieces, and super fortunate to have two really solid editors to work with.
So number one, they have to get it.
Yeah.
Before you even train them. And number two, they sort of have to be in sync.
Yeah.
And then you gotta do the final touch.
Yeah. I mean, I think intuition and taste is like the first thing that I look for in an editor. If they pick very bad music, it's a huge red flag for bad taste to me. And when somebody has bad tastes in music, some people can get trained. Like some editors that we hired, were off at the beginning and learned. But I find that usually, if they have very bad music taste at the beginning, it's gonna stick throughout.
Oh,
And
that's an interesting screening tool, almost like seeing their music taste in music.
Yeah.
And then to figure out if they're gonna make it as a good editor or not.
Because I think as an editor, you're on YouTube, you're basically almost director as well, right?
Yeah.
In some way, because you're picking. It's not like a movie where you have a shot list and you're just cutting and you have to find the best time and there's more structure. You're doing a lot of the work on your own and you're picking the sound bites. You can create the story yourself.
Yeah.
And so your taste and your vision is super important, right? Because I'm not going to see the 12 hours of raw footage. I'm going to see the 2 hour or maybe 1 hour. And in that, you've already taken out 90%. So if you don't really understand the vision or don't have good taste or don't understand how to construct a story, I'm already missing out on everything you've cut out. I think taste is important, not just almost in the quality of the song, but also in the placement, right? Are you able to build intrigue and tension at the beginning and then release without it feeling jammed down people's throats? Because if the song is super tense, even though the environment is kind of not that fast-paced, you're off, right? So I think there are times where I still have to cram them with notes, with music, because I'm quite picky with that. For me, music is, I don't want to say 50%, but it's close. I think that the pacing, the way that you take somebody through an emotional journey happens with the story, obviously, with the footage, but also with music. I think when I watch a video and the music is off, or I could just tell there's something not clicking, it takes me out of the experience a little bit. So, that's been something that we've trained and retrained and worked together with. That's always something that typically if somebody comes in quite experienced as an editor, they still have to go through quite a few months of me changing all the music until they're ready
You just
to go.
articulated something that I just couldn't put my finger on when it comes to that ability to judge somebody's editing skills. But I agree with you. I think that's a huge part of it. Yeah.
Taste is the first thing, because then skill, I think you can learn it. I wasn't a good editor when I started, and I still don't think I'm not a skilled editor, but I know how to cut to tell my story. I couldn't do the After Effects things that our editors do, but I know I could cut the video if I had to. Those
to
kind
me,
of
the best storytelling is that without using any effects or just by doing base cutting and pasting, even without music, it's just number one, it logically flows. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And then there's the emotional buildup and pause, whatever. And then there's a climax, and then I think it's internalized as part of my own storytelling.
Totally.
But it was quite surprising to see that maybe it's something either you get or you don't.
I do think from a growth mindset perspective, I think you can learn anything, but some people it's just going to take longer to teach them than others. And you have to kind of decide, okay, how steep is this learning curve going to be for them? Because I think taste, you develop it throughout your whole life, right? If you grew up listening to just only what's on the radio, I think you're going to have a little bit more of a limited taste and perspective on like what music can be, versus if you explore a lot of different genres or grew up doing that or do it later in your years, I think you can develop a different perspective on music. And that for me is something that I was quite lucky to have gone to do. My mom was very interested in music and got us to listen to everything. Yeah, when the music choices feel very basic or simple or almost like too predictable is also another issue, right? If the scene is tense and the song is so in your face, that also I don't enjoy. So it's in the details. We don't get it right every time. And when you have a 40-minute video, sometimes, okay, we don't have a better alternative for this song, let's go. You know, like when you have like 50 songs in a video, you have to kind of give up your battles a little bit.
It almost feels like, at least for me, it feels like, are you in tune with your intuition and emotion while you watch the video, that you just feel it, that, oh, you need to make this part longer, you need to make the music louder, or etc. I also felt that, at least from for me looking at, you know, a person, you know, do they get it or not? Let's say, for example, asking them, oh, what type of topics would you suggest? You know, I almost feel like pattern recognition and breaking down things and understanding things is also really helpful too, because if a person can't exactly break down the pattern and understand what might work or not, you know, what potentially, how to make it more emotional or not could be another kind of important thing as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's a great point, intuition. Yeah. I think that's the most important maybe quality in an editor, right? Intuition and taste. Because then everything else, they can kind of learn it with time. So for me, when I look for editors, that's what I look for.
By the way, I think we're losing our audience so fast.
Yeah.
They're like, man, these guys are just so
Nerds.
passionate about
Yeah.
talking about editing and nerding out on editing, and we just don't care. But hey, we're passionate about it, so it just shows how much of a storyteller that we aspire to be.
Yeah.
And again, you know, we do consider you to be one of the master storytellers that
that's
we've
so
ever come
kind.
across. But
Thank you.
maybe it's got something to do with the fact that you're like, you know, you're from Sweden or something, because they always seem to have this musical talent, whether it be like top DJs in the world or
There's
something.
a lot of musicians
Why
coming
is
from
it
Sweden.
why do you think that is? I'm curious, culturally.
My theory, in Sweden, we have this, I think it's Jantelagen, I think it's called. But basically it's this concept in throughout Scandinavia, which is a bit toxic, but I also respect that it comes from a place that was needed at some point in the culture. But basically this idea that you shouldn't try and be better than others.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so, and this is something that's quite strong, even to this day. There's kind of like this mentality of like, don't shine your light too loud to make the others feel bad.
That is actually very much of an typical Asian mindset though, right? Don't stand out too much.
Yeah.
In Japan, they say "deteru kugi wa utareru," which means that a nail which is pointing more up is going to be shut
hammered
down,
down.
hammered
Yeah.
down. You know,
Wow.
so
Nail that sticks out needs to be hammered down.
Yeah.
That's so interesting that there's like that shared element. Yeah.
But we're talking about Europe though.
Yeah.
We're talking about Sweden. Why? Where does that come from?
I mean, Scandinavia, you know, now we see the Scandinavian countries as like, you know, quite developed and whatnot, but for a long time we were very poor. Sweden went through massive famines several times, especially in the late 1800s. And up until after World War II was very behind, you know, we were like potato farmers, like not too much going on. We had a, you know, kingdom earlier on, but it wasn't much of an economy, and Sweden staying neutral during World War II didn't see too much destruction. So they had more infrastructure and wood, and so they were able to build, and then there was a very like kind of socialist government that was built. So everyone got some kind of an education and they tried to lift people out of poverty. I think the idea was kind of to try and keep people relatively equal and have more of like a strong middle class to climb rather than having, a few outshine the others. But I think that was kind of needed for a period of time, and I think we still need to graduate from it. I never lived in Sweden, although my parents are from there, but I did feel it through a bit my parents, and through going to Sweden, there is a bit of that culture still there. And so I think my theory is that a lot of the producers are Swedish, but there's not a whole lot of performing artists that are Swedish, because you're the person that is doing the music behind the scenes, sitting on the computer, mixing everything, but you're not the one on stage actually outshining anyone. So I think that they've been more attracted to production type of roles rather than performing artists. We have a few big performing artists like ABBA, and used to have Avicii, but yeah, that's my personal theory, and I think I've heard it echoed by a few other people that resonate with that idea.
Man, that's fascinating. Yeah, never thought about that.
Yeah. So I think they just enjoy being more behind the scenes, and I think Swedes they put a lot of emphasis on kind of creativity, and they do leave room. Like, school is quite flexible. You have time in the afternoon to do your own activities, and a lot of my friends in Sweden all had like obscure hobbies of like, doing like play motion films, and like they were just all doing something interesting. But school in France was so long, and then you had homework, that like you didn't really have time for too many hobbies. It was kind of like school was the main thing. But in Sweden, they had all afternoon basically off. So everyone played an instrument or was a part of some sports team. Like, everyone has multiple hobbies, which I think was positive. I think they're quite encouraging of you pursuing these things. And for some reason, music has been something that Swedes have been quite good at. So I think it's an interesting kind of observation and cross between the two cultures.
Do you think that the same logic about that particular culture also impacts how, at least from my perspective, there doesn't seem to be this like global entrepreneurs that are coming out of Sweden, right?
Yeah.
Like the Elon Musks of the world.
Yeah.
Where, because they don't want to stand out too much like that.
It's possible. Yeah, it's definitely possible. I think that there is, hopefully it's changing. There's a couple of big ones, like the founder of Spotify is changing that a little bit. But yeah, I think Swedes enjoy being really solid teammates almost more than being the front runners. But I think that it's, the current generation is changing that. I think it's less ingrained in the culture. Yeah, it's something that I'd like to understand better, exactly where it came from, because Denmark has it as well. There's very much like just don't make the others feel too bad. Like, do your thing, but if you could tone it down a little bit, that would be better.
Did you know about this?
I didn't know, and it sounds very kind of familiar, like even Japanese culture or even Korea, where I'd say it's
minus the creativity.
I'd say more in Japan. Of the group mentality. Yeah, it's really hard to say your opinion sometimes, because you're gonna be too out there, right? But I do see that, let's say for even like a corporate level, having group mentality is good, but unless you're able to say your opinion and so on, you're not going to become like a leader, And I just think that you need both in order to succeed. You need to understand the group as well as be able to say your opinion as well.
Well, speaking of culture though, because you have been to a lot of African countries as well as a lot of Asian countries, is there something that like unites us all as humanity? Like, because you've been to so many different cultures, people that are different from you. What unites us?
Love.
That's deep.
And it sounds so simple, but literally everyone has it within them, and everyone wants to share it with others. I think there's an inherent kindness that we all have, and I think it's just some people's circumstances brought them to the wrong path, but I really think it's within every single one of us, and I've experienced it everywhere.
Even in places where people are like struggling with their daily lives.
100%. And of course I've met some like rude people or whatever, but it's the majority of the people everywhere that I've gone have been immensely kind and like wanting to connect and wanting to help. And even people like in Iraq, like the country that went through so much, I went to get ice cream at a stand and he refused to take my money because he was like, no, you're a guest. I'm like, wow, I'm a customer. He's like, no, you're a guest here. You keep it. I'm like, what the? I've experienced kindness everywhere, and I think it is within each of us, and I think everyone needs to just remember that we're all a part of the one same human community. The borders have been drawn for arbitrary reasons, but I really think that there is larger purpose that connects us. And I think I would hope that borders become less and less important, even though they don't look like they are, not looking like we're going in that direction. That's what I would hope for the future, because I think more sharing and more seeing that through others and through people from all around the world, I think that the more connected we'll feel.
And how would you let love overpower the growing, division, polarization, hatred that just seems to be getting worse by the day? What can we do to let love win? Because it just doesn't seem like it's only like a small minority of people, such as yourself, that have the kind of vision or the purpose to, pursue that thing with the noble, a worthy cause. But then sometimes it could feel like we're just like banging our head against the wall when even like, half the stuff you said about the border, and then you could already see people just going nuts, like, oh, more refugees, more whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so, sometimes it just feels pretty hopeless.
Yeah. I think if each of us could choose love in our own life and choosing it more towards people that we get to interact with on a daily basis, that ripple effect will spread, right? Because every person in the world can't go seeking this massive grand quest of a life. Not everyone has the luxury to be able to do that either. But I think if we each try and focus on how can we be a better son, how can we be a better brother, better father, better sister, better mother, then that ripple effect of kindness will spread eventually. Because I think that everyone who is angry out in the world just has been treated poorly and are just looking for somebody to recognize them as a human being. And I think that if we start small, I think that's the best thing that every single person can look to do, right? Like, how can I be a good citizen? You can keep expanding after that, right? But how can you be kind to a stranger? If you see somebody that can't carry all their grocery bags, can you help them walk them to their home? Or, if somebody doesn't have enough change, can you just chip in, I think these small moments of kindness around the world will create such a ripple effect, because you don't know, maybe this will change that person's day, and then they'll treat their partner better or their daughter better, and then that person will have their ripple effect on their own. When the world feels overwhelming with problems, I think starting small and focusing on what you can control, which is being a good person, if we all did that, I think the world will all the problems would go away.
Such a perfect answer to end this podcast on.
Perfect.
That's amazing. Appreciate your time. I certainly hope that whenever you come back to Korea or wherever we may bump into in different countries, that we continue to work together, hopefully. On my part, again, I kind of said it at the beginning of the podcast that you're looking at probably the least well-traveled person, and this is one fear that I do need to overcome. Is for some reason and maybe like the older I become, and you just become more terrified of like just doing the type of random things that you do in a different country, like putting yourself out there. Maybe because maybe it's my ego, I got too much to lose or something. So maybe at some point, maybe you can just like, give it a quick kick in the ass for me, and then just like, hey, Steven, do this.
Is there a country you've always wanted to travel to that you haven't been to yet?
See, that itself for me is a very overwhelming question.
Really?
I have no idea.
Maybe take some time and look. It could be nice I like looking at maps. That helps me. There's this app on the App Store called Cytera that I've been playing with, and it's like a geography quiz kind of game. And you can pick continents, you can pick you can pick the world map, and you have to, basically it gives you a prompt of a country, and then you have to pin it on the map. So it's obviously very hard if you start with world map. So start with maybe a region of the world you know well, and then that makes you realize, oh wow, I didn't realize Georgia was right next to Azerbaijan, and that's interesting. Like that region, I wonder what's going on there. I've never been there before. And then you start to look at pictures of it. Wow, that's beautiful. Nobody's ever told me about this place before. And that's kind of sometimes how just explore curiosity through maps.
Wow. See, even just hearing that, it gives me anxiety.
Really?
Yeah. So yeah.
What do you think it is that makes you anxious?
I don't know.
Have you had bad travel experiences?
The fact that you need to plan things and then you need to kind of leave everything that you're doing, which is something like for example, running this company, right?
Yeah.
and my immediate rationalization is I don't have time. Which of course it is important at this point.
Yeah.
And
I think starting small, you don't need to go to the crazy remote places that I've been traveling to, but I think if you start small and then next one, maybe you do Vietnam. I don't know if you've already done it, but you kind of take your way out into different spaces, because once you realize that it's not that bad and it's not that scary, and things can happen, things can go wrong. Your hotel booking can be messed up or whatever, but you just figure it out in the end.
Well, I mean, you already set the bar high and it already inspired me with Syria and Iraq
But those, again, like it's so much more beautiful than you expect it to be, and that's what makes you hopeful about the world. I think you'll enjoy it maybe more than you think. It might be a bit uncomfortable, but maybe it's exactly the type of seeking discomfort and saying yes that
maybe
you need.
Maybe one day I need to be an actual episode in Yes Theory.
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel like going on an adventure with you and just doing something, film together. It could be even for a particular cause or something.
Oh yeah, help the local community or something.
Help local community, make a school or something. Like just help people and combine videos. Try to raise more awareness. Do something.
That would be great.
That'd be really cool.
Because we've actually been doing that all these years. We actually raise a lot of money through our community, probably like close to $1 million to like build school in Indian slum.
In the slum.
That's incredible.
Single dads,
helping single dads and stuff like that. So we
teenage moms.
That's the taking action part for us.
Yeah.
We do a lot of that, mainly in Asia, but then ultimately we have to scale that to the world.
That sounds amazing. I mean, I look forward to seeing you travel more. It'll come. And letting go of maybe there's some fear of letting go, right? As you said, your schedule, your duties here.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you can't explain it, because people will look at him as like, oh, of course you're the founder of Asian Buzz. You must be well traveled. Like I'm like, no, not at all.
I think you're
definitely way better traveled than I am.
I've been to over about 20 countries.
Yeah.
But even for Australia, I've been to like so many cities around it, but that's still one country. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure I spent like 10 years in Sydney. That's it.
Yeah, and I just love traveling, just because it almost feels like I'm just learning so much and experiencing so much at like 3 times, 10 times the speed of, let's say if I was living in Sydney for 20 years, for example. And so that's why I think I just love to travel.
That's amazing. Yeah, it slows down time. It really does, because I think in a routine is an amazingly powerful tool to be productive and to accomplish things, but it's also a thing that you can time just kind of flies by a little bit. You're like, whoa, it's been 2 months, versus when you're traveling, it feels like the time distorts in a weird way, because everything is new. So you're in that kid mindset again of, wow, what the hell? The signs are this color here? Or, like the menu is not in English. Okay, I'll just have whatever this is. This good? This is good? Okay, I'll have that. You just have no idea what's coming. It's like, let's see, hope it's good. Like I've done that enough times to find it it's like menu roulette. You just hope it's all right. Yeah,
I also find that, when you go overseas, like you remember every single day when you were there. And if life was about, the amount of memorable days that you have, sometimes if you're just doing work every single day, sometimes that's necessary too, but life becomes like a blur. But when you're just going out and experiencing, doing different things, those just becomes days which is like, okay, I did that day 1, I did that day 2, I went here, I went there. Yeah.
So for our audience, I'll be on Yes Theory.
Perfect.
And doing
Next
crazy
episode,
things to
we'll be on
put
Yes
myself
Theory.
out of my comfort zone like I've never done before.
Yeah,
so.
We'll organize it. You'll find out. You'll find out 2 hours before the flight leaves.
Steven, you're leaving right now.
I would not believe you, but I've seen you do that. I've seen you do that, so I'm like, I'm actually afraid that you're gonna do that. So that's scary. Oh my God. But anyway. But
thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for your
This has
time.
been-
And we'll definitely talk again soon.
I hope so.
Cool. All right. Well, that's it. Thanks everybody.
Subscribe.
Seek discomfort.
Seek discomfort.
Yes.